Snap your fingers. Do I need to the button down or just click it? Okay. All right. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to our seminar. We've got a little activity to start things off, and then we're going to talk about behavioral covenants. So I want to give, Holden, could you put the first slide up real quick? Okay, yep. So I wanted to give a shout out to the rest of our committee. So that's me, Jennifer Pritchett, Jane Emery, Shelby Havens, Jeremy Archer, Isella, Stephanie Wogelmuth. Steffi, I hope I said your name right. Okay. Ron Hicks, Beth Heinrich, and Wendy Wheeler. So I think most or all of us are here in the room today. And so the purpose of our seminar is to continue to raise awareness and provide some information about creating behavioral covenants, and also to continue building connection and fellowship as we work together in community to clarify our values. So Jennifer, you want to come and we'll do our little warm-up activity, icebreaker?
Sure. Uh-oh. So our warm-up, our icebreaker activity this morning is called a spectrogram. And a spectrogram is a gauge, a range, or a spectrum that measures opinions, ideas, feelings, likes, dislikes, experience, you name it. And it's created by setting up, it can be any kind of object. Let's say object Elizabeth is one end of the spectrum, or at least this space here. And let's say that Jim is the other end of the spectrum, or at least some space here. And then there's an imaginary line from 0 to 10. You are worth far more than 0 in my heart, Elizabeth. And so from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, to kind of vote with your feet, show with your feet where you are along this spectrum. And that can be anything. An example might be, how long have you been at UCG? Well, this is my very first year. Or I haven't even joined yet, or this is the very first Sunday that I've ever come. And then over there at 10,
yeah, and then way over here at the other end might be, somebody who's been here since day 0. And then everybody else would kind of find their spot in the middle, and you might need to chat with your neighbors. Again, this is just an example. This is not the prompt that we're going to do in a minute, but you would need to kind of chat with your neighbors to figure out where you fit in on the line. So it's an opportunity to get up and move. If you are not into getting up and moving right now, you can
use one of our
members. You can have one of us stand in for you. So I could, you could have a proxy vote for the exercise. So just let me or one of the other members of our committee know if you're not up to standing and getting up, and one of us will do that for you.
But if you can, there's a visceral aspect to this exercise, to actually stand and be able to go, well, where are you on the line, Ezra?
I'm right here on the line, Jennifer.
What number are you?
I'm a 6.5.
Oh, okay. So that means I don't think I'm a 6.5. I think I'm more like a 4. So I'm going to move down. Mm-hmm. That kind of interaction.
Yeah. All right. So Jennifer, do you want to share? So we'll just maybe take a moment. I love a moment of quiet reflection.
Just one word about
group safety. Yes. Jennifer has one more word about group safety.
When we're doing group work, oftentimes the very first activity that we do is create a group safety agreement. And it's oftentimes used in closed groups, and this group is open. People may come in and join us. So we're not actually going to be drafting group safety agreements, but we wanted to mention that it would be, how do we want to talk to one another? much like the children's exercise that we did today, that would be what a group safety agreement is, so that we can feel vulnerable and trust being in a group. So it mirrors the work that we're doing with the behavioral covenant. So I just wanted to mention that, in that this is not uncommon, and it's something that is very close to what we're working on.
Yes, thank you. All right, so take a couple of moments, take a couple of deep breaths. Just notice how you're feeling this morning. It's a cold but lively morning here at UCG, and we've got some good stuff to do over the next 30 or 40 minutes. So Jennifer, do you want to introduce the question for the spectrogram now?
Have the next slide. Okay. How familiar are you with behavioral covenants? So it could be something like, I've never even heard of a behavioral covenant until this morning, to I've actually created a behavioral covenant at another church, to I kind of know what it means, and we did have one at my church, but I didn't really, that would be maybe around 5. So 0 if you have no experience, 10, lots of experience, anywhere in between. So does anyone have any questions first about how we're doing this? It may be a little tight, but that's fine. If we need to extend beyond the circle of chairs, that's fine too. So just take a minute or just a second. How do you feel about this question? Where in your body do you sense where you are? And when you think you have a number, go ahead and place yourself, move into your spot, your number on the spectrogram. 0, 10. And I'm going to put a little space in the chair so that.
Okay. Thank you. You'd be a 0, okay. I'm glad that you're here, Betsy. Good to see you. Right, everybody. Excellent explanation.
Thank you. You too. So give them a.
All right. All right, everyone. If you can hear my voice, put your hand on your head. If you can hear my voice, do a jazz hand. All right. If you can hear my voice, put your finger on your nose. Excellent. Thank you. These are all my summer camp skills that I used to use when I worked at summer camp. All right. So let's hear from a few folks why you placed yourself where you did on the line.
Do we have a volunteer from the 0 end, 0, 1, 2, that would like to share why you chose that particular place? Julie?
One set, wait, we're gonna both on.
Okay, I'm not a zero, but I had never heard of this. But because I go to UCG, I've heard about this. I've read about the workshop we're going to do. So I'm just a little bit familiar, like a one.
I am totally a 0.
And can we have maybe someone in the mid-range? Okay. Volunteer somewhere. Okay, Glenn?
I didn't hear about behavioral covenants as so described in whatever in language, but it was always an assumed covenant or whatever with other people and the community. So that's why I'm into 5, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that I've done similar types of things in work environments and, with an event or something like that, but not in a church setting.
And then how about some folks near the end who know a great deal? 8s, 9s, 10s.
I'm placing myself as a 9. I've gotten together with various groups of people over many years, writing covenants for particular events or groups that I've volunteered in. So.
Awesome, thanks.
Anyone else in the 9, 10, 8 range?
I worked at an elementary school for 25 years, and there reached a point where we had to do a behavioral covenant with our parents because of some people acting out. And so that's why that came about.
Number are you?
10.
Awesome. So I think we can have folks return to their seats now. All right. And now we're going to turn things over to Shelby, who has a lot of very good educational information for us and a fantastic rolling cart for her materials. Did you bring that from home, Shelby? Okay.
Well, that was fun. And I found out some interesting things just now from some of you. So I'm going to just do a really brief little informational thing about why we're doing this and just share a little bit more, take a little bit of a deeper dive into behavioral covenants. So why are we doing this? In 2024, the Pathfinder Subcommittee recommended the creation of a church-wide behavioral covenant. The recommendation was approved by the congregation at the fall 2024 congregational meeting. So the Congregational Life Team was tasked with 2 things, as Ezra shared: facilitating opportunities for connection and fellowship in our church community, and also coordinating a behavioral covenant for the congregation. So what is a covenant? Just to define this super briefly, a covenant is a deep, abiding promise that's grounded in our deepest values, to which we agree on as a congregation, and we agree to hold ourselves accountable. So then what is a behavioral covenant? This can be an effective way to establish like some ground rules to ensure right relations and to keep a steady course through times of change and chaos, diverse opinions, and passionate discussions within our church family. A behavioral covenant is a written document developed by church members and leaders and agreed to and owned by its creators and practiced regularly as a spiritual discipline. Hang with me here. Arthritic fingers don't want to work right when it's cold. So As members of UCG, we seek to covenant, that is, promise one another how we will be in community with one another. Our promises are vows made with the intention of upholding them. Unlike a legal ruling where we often seek compensation for a breached contract, what we seek as our desired outcome would be described as an understanding and recommitment. We want to know the following things: what went wrong, what are we having trouble with, and how do we try again? Because covenants are promises to follow and not rules prescribing punishment, they seek more to identify and negotiate changes in our behavior, not in our personalities, not in our values, since these are pretty much non-negotiable. Thus, covenants describe actions and behaviors, not personality changes. While we cannot change the personality of individuals as much as we might like to, we can help one another uphold our covenant and seek to create environments that increase the possibility of reconciliation and peace. So, what are the benefits to us from developing a behavioral covenant as a church? A behavioral covenant forms a community that is respectful and loving, clarifies what you can expect from the group and what the group can expect from you, helps people discern and discuss difficult issues in a civil manner without a win-lose mentality, and models how a spiritual community should act. So what does it look like, or what are some ideas to consider when we think about crafting a behavioral covenant for the church? We want to practice open and direct communication, use I statements to express ourselves. We want to listen respectfully, ask questions for clarification. We want to seek to understand rather than judge. We want to practice honesty. We want to speak the truth in love, gentleness, and patience. We want to trust one another. We want to be hard or firm on issues and soft on people. That's about all that I brought just to get the conversation going and throw out some ideas there. I do want to say that the concept of behavioral covenants, to the best of my knowledge, has been around a while, like maybe since the 1980s. There is a full body of literature from many different denominations on the internet. I put a brief little bibliography here on the documents that I used in this presentation, but there's a lot out there that I'll be happy to share, maybe in a newsletter article or that kind of thing, if people are interested in taking a deeper dive. One of the first books to be published was called Behavioral Covenants in Congregations by Gilbert Rendell. I think this was first published in 1989. I've read it. Wendy has read it, actually. I think other people on our committee have. It might be a good one, for a small group, like a book discussion group, if people are interested to take a deeper dive into this. I think actually I'll just circulate it around if people want to take a look while we're talking. So the next part is going to open up the group to discussion, questions, or comments, and I'm going to turn it back over to Ezra. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelby. So we've got some time for questions and discussion. And one question I would like to pose for the group. So for those of you who were further to this end of the spectrum, would anybody like to share a couple of sentences about your experience, either with a behavioral covenant or a similar process, like in a workplace or a school? Awesome.
I remember this was probably 2005. I wasn't even a church member. It was kind of my first experience with UCG, and I attended the retreat that year. And one of the things I was handed when I agreed to do like a group activity was this document. It was a pretty short document. It was called Ground Rules for Groups Activities or something like that. I don't know if anyone has seen that in a while. And I was like, wow, this, I mean, it made so much sense. And I was like, I never thought about all of this. And to me, that was kind of the foundation of like how I experienced UC. And a lot of the stuff that's on that list right there in front of us right now was kind of in that document. And I haven't heard a lot about it since then, but I feel like a lot of the concepts in that and what we're talking about here, I feel like they've just kind of been permeated UCG, but never like formally accepted by the whole congregation. So I'm glad this is happening, and I appreciate you guys us together.
Getting my steps in.
I would echo what Eric said. I don't know that we've done it recently, but the women's overnight would always begin with that exact kind of thing, that we use I statements, that we can share our experience when we leave the group, but we're not to talk about anybody else's experience. So, that was the first thing we would do at the women's overnight, was to share those ground rules or behavioral covenant.
I'll just add 2 points in that. In my experience, it's important to acknowledge that the terms of a covenant can be vague for some people and can have certainly multiple. All right, I'm back. So it's important to allow for the possibility of conflicts. And the other important thing is that keeping the terms of the covenant front of mind repeatedly is really helpful, because it allows for conflict to occur. It allows for confrontations to occur when people observe or have the experience of somebody departing from the covenant. Because, of course, the covenant is only as good as it's enforceable. And it does require everybody to participate in enforcement. So maybe enforcement's not the right word, but implementation. So as much as there is discussion about what the terms are, it becomes easier to have an open discussion about whether a particular behavior or a particular interaction is consistent with some aspect of the covenant.
I was going to mention that in most of the situations where I've been in any groups or women's overnights or those types of things, we've talked about covenants, but there's never been much need for them to be applied because everybody's getting along so well. But it's an interesting thing. I'm also a marriage therapist, and it comes up with that, because how do we behave when, we're having a disagreement, or we're really feeling that we're being attacked, or there's some kind of confrontation or conflict? And it's interesting, because one of the things I hear a lot is how anger is a surface emotion, and underneath, really, the deeper feelings are feeling hurt, afraid, and sad. And if we can get, it's like the anger kind of softens, and then we can have interaction. But just to say, it's like, I think people in our society and the whole world, maybe, we've been so taught to, but we don't know how. I think that there's so many people who don't know how to be with their anger with people, with others. And it's one thing if it's our family or our spouse, and then maybe we've learned a certain way to be that's not effective, which that's a lot of people. And with strangers, it's just very difficult. So it's like what we're learning, I think, in a big way, is how to be with those difficult times, those difficult feelings. And and be able to move through them and share our deep, deep feelings and have respect for one another.
So, as I'm listening to the two of you talk about behavioral covenants and their purpose, it suddenly occurs to me that I have quite a bit of experience with them, but in a different context and using different terminology. I'm a longtime member of a 12-step fellowship, and those fellowships have traditions and a group conscience. And those things are another way of creating and implementing and working through issues in a behavioral covenant. It's the same thing. And the foundational idea there in those fellowships that underlies all of the bullet points is that there is a common purpose, that it's mutual assistance in physical, emotional, and spiritual growth. And so I think it's important for us to think about what the common purpose of our faith community that underlies each of those bullet points is. If I had to offer something off the top of my head without deep thought, just never a great idea, I would say it is that we are a community of mutual support dedicated to encouraging, nurturing, advancing the spiritual growth of every single member of this community, however that individual chooses to express it.
Just want to share briefly, I've had a number of experiences in groups that didn't have behavioral covenants. There's sort of an assumption that, oh, we don't need this, or we enter into a situation of being taught classes with students thinking it'll be fine. We really needed it, and it's sometimes too late. Once you get into a process, in my experience, or maybe not too late, but it seemed hard to introduce it after things were going on. And with youth groups too, if you don't start with this, you're in trouble. So anyway, those are my experiences.
Yeah, probably a lot of us can relate to at times being in a group, maybe even our families of origin or our workplace where, we didn't have those shared standards for how things would go. And that can be very dysregulating and very disruptive. And it can be really healing to be in this kind of community now and have the opportunity to work on formalizing those things. Other questions, comments, experiences that people want to share? When I facilitate therapy groups and nobody talks, I quietly count to 10 in my head. I didn't even have to count.
One of my thoughts as I look at this and think about relationships here at UCG and other places is that not everyone has a comfort with expressing themselves as well as this calls for. And I'm wondering how in a behavioral covenant we can make space for that, whether it's a form of advocacy for people who are uncertain, but who should be heard. And maybe I'm looking for a problem that doesn't exist, but I think that happens sometimes.
Now we have two mics.
Mm-hmm. So in answer to Tony's question, there is a process that we use in the nursing profession sometimes in doing performance evaluations, and it's called appreciative inquiry. And it kind of goes like this. Traditionally, we've all been an employee and you get an annual performance review. So what happens is you go in, or there's the supervisor that has to say to an employee, you were late for your shift 5% of the time last year, and you have to improve this. So, but what if you flipped the information and you said to that employee, you were on time for 95% of your shifts last year, and we really appreciate you. Do more of that. I think that sometimes when I've had to evaluate nursing colleagues, if I said it in the negative, probably I ended up doing damage to my relationship with that employee. But through appreciative inquiry, it's relationship building. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby. Yeah, and I would also be interested to hear from folks who were more on this end of the room, questions that you have, comments, things that are coming up. All right, Glenn, I love your bolo.
Thank you. I would just add that being a communications major, I learned that a big part, a huge part of the communication process is just simply really listening. So if I don't say a whole lot, which is uncommon, don't be alarmed because I am truly trying to listen or to what you're saying and whatever. And I kind of say that in response to one of the past remarks and whatever, just before the last remark was said, because sometimes people can misinterpret a lack of verbal communication with people when they're simply listening and trying to go ahead and get their bearings on what's going on, for sure.
All right, now we're going over to Jim.
I want to bring up the idea of emotional intelligence. It's something I'm really interested in, and thinking about us as a community that has that. I see it as pretty high at UCG, but I think of my younger self that I really lacked a lot of it, and I'm still obviously growing and hoping I can improve, but I want to have space for that younger person who can only be angry or doesn't know how to be angry, and it comes out other ways. So I just wanted to question, I guess, how do we keep space for that, for the people who will struggle with this, to practice it? Can we still, have the covenant and, I don't know, encourage people to move in that right direction and to growing in their emotional intelligence?
Hey, I am keeping an eye. Jane's got the microphone.
I got another microphone. So I'm Jane Emery, and I'm on the Congregational Life Committee, and I've just really enjoyed being on the committee. I just want to comment about group process, and I'm not sure what this means, but I find myself in groups. I'm very introverted, even though I'm a social introvert, but I find myself having difficulty having space to say what I want to say. And I really appreciate so many very intelligent, passionate people in this congregation. And I'm just wondering if some kind of guidelines for group process. My experience at times has been that someone puts an idea on the table, one other person nods their head and says, thank you. Yes, that's a great idea. And we move on. And also there's power structures in groups here and in small groups and in big groups. So depending on who says and agrees with the idea, it might get like, okay, we're moving on because it's done. And there's 6 other people. My perception is there's 6 other people in the room who haven't even spoken. So in terms of implicit agreement, but the conversation moves on. So I'm just wondering, and it might not be here, but the idea of group behavior or group facilitation, I would feel more safe if the idea was we're talking about an issue before we move on or make decisions. Does anyone else have something to share? Because it moves on fast. I know we're all busy. Sometimes I feel like, we're going to make the meeting really short. Let's get this done. And at times I feel like there's not enough space for me to say. But I agree with almost everything everybody says. So
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, and one theme that I'm hearing that's really important is that we're having space for different styles of communications or different levels of introversion and extroversion, and valuing the diversity of how our minds work and how we process information. I think that's really important. So any other, we've got, I guess, about 10 minutes. So yeah. Right.
Hi, my name is Dar, and I want to talk about the F word, feedback. Giving and receiving feedback has been a challenge for me my entire life, both as a receiver and a giver of feedback. And I think it's a necessary part of being in community. When I came into the office last April, I said to my coworkers, I said, the number one thing that's important to me is that you give me feedback. Because if I'm doing something and you don't tell me, one, I don't know. And if you do tell me, then I have the opportunity to say, thank you, I can try to change this behavior. Or, you know what, I don't have it in me. If you're asking me to climb a tree without a ladder, I can't do it. If you're asking me to give you oranges when all I can produce is apples, I also can't do that. So in a functioning community, I was at the massage school for 25 years and we would hire facilitators, and the number one thing we talked about was giving and receiving feedback. So I would like, I would respectfully request that however we move forward, that we address the F word.
I'm Candace. I'm going to build off of something Dar said, which is feedback. What I'm curious about is what in this process is the opportunity for it to evolve. So I'm a big draft person, and I would think that we won't necessarily get it right the first time, and that's okay. That things I've heard that behavior covenants, part of it is supposed to be an evolution. So I just wanted to put that out there because that would be my hope and expectation based off of experience. Then I had a reaction to two of the words in this presentation. It's my reaction. One of them is the word vow. To me, that's a really strong word. I'm okay with promise, but vow to me implies something much stronger. So I would encourage us not to use that word, but that's me. And the other is truth. So I think truth is seen very differently by different people. So when you say speak the truth, what does that really mean? People interpret reality differently. So again, I would encourage us to think about that word in whatever we do.
Hi, I'm John Joplin. I'm fairly new. Oh, I'm sorry.
There's another F word that I've already heard mentioned, and that's facilitation. Not all people in groups are equally facile at getting group process going, and we are blessed in this community with a number of good facilitators. But the facilitators, for example, I'm one of the people, and I can really empathize with Jane, that essentially, if I have the thought is slow to come. And if the facilitator is cutting in before I've said the last word of my thought, I can't follow up with it. And facilitators know how to work with those things, and they are interested in looking at group process. And I think anything that goes on as the facilitators should be really well identified and trained. And I think, as I say, we already have a lot of people who are trained in this area, but facilitation is really critical in any process.
Yes, I'm new to this. Actually, I spent since the mid to late 70s in employee relations, and in employee relations, this is very similar. It's I was taught by my wonderful mentors that keep it simple. Job descriptions, keep it simple. No more than 5 lines, no more than, just use phrases, action phrases, and things like that. And of course, agreements between parties is very critical. And so I've always used in my last human resource or employee relations position up until 10 years ago was till I went blind. And then I always use the simplest phrases possible because that made it understandable to everybody from the top down or whatever the organization needed. And so I start with simplicity, and that gets everybody to understand what's going on, and also convert all that into action, and also get the group to work together. Thank you.
All right, so we've got a few minutes to wrap up. You want to do a closing spectrogram? All right, so now that we've had some time to talk and share some feedback, learn a little bit more, we're going to do the spectrogram again. So you can have an opportunity to perhaps shift where you are in the room. So again, if you know absolutely nothing, you're going to be over here by Elizabeth. Maybe nobody is over here anymore. And then if you feel like you know everything there is to know, you're going to be way over here by Jim, or, if you are, very adept. Yes.
Does that work? So, okay.
There you are.
So I thought I would tweak the wording just a little bit on this last question, if that's okay. So we've all had a chance to listen to one another, and some of us were able to share a little bit. So what if we were to phrase this last question upon which we will place ourselves? How competent and self-assured do you feel to create a behavioral covenant? How competent and feel to create a behavioral covenant? That's all of us collectively.
And not right this second. We're not creating the behavioral covenant right this second, but being part of the process moving forward. All right, so you can hop up again.
And she's very confident.
Ooh, Jennifer's using security. She's using one of those attachment words.
What do I feel, or do I feel the group feel? You feel as an individual. You can't know how the group feels. You only feel the group. Oh, it's you. It's I know it's a little different, but no, that's a different feel.
Here's what that.
Oh, thank you. You want me to stand and stand for somewhere back here? Okay. How are you doing, Teddy? It's okay. We're still at the beginning of the process. There'll be lots more opportunities to learn. Practice. Well, you got that. You know, we have an hour conference and we did it all by ourselves. Well, no, and they said, oh, good. No.
All right, everybody. So we've arranged ourselves again on our little spectrogram. Jennifer, do you have an idea of how we'd like to hear a little bit more from the group before we wrap up?
Yeah. So who shifted from the first spectrogram to the second one? I see Elizabeth.
So what do you want me to do?
What changed?
Well, it's first of all, it's a different question. It's one was, have you ever heard of this? No. I'm a careful and good communicator. I'm not at all sure that I have the energy to participate in group processes. There's just one more thing I'd like to say, which doesn't answer your question. I was moved and really impressed by the quality of the thinking of the people in this room. So that's really all I have to say. What did I say? I was a 2.5, and I used to be a 0.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I see that a lot of people move further this direction. So would somebody in the middle who has shifted like to volunteer what shifted in them? Eric?
So I was down in the 4 area, and now I feel like I'm more in the 6 area. And like Elizabeth, I was just super impressed by the quality and thoughtfulness of all the commentary that we just had. And so, yeah, I don't feel like, oh yeah, I can write one on my own, like, this week. But I guess I feel more competent looking at something that, is going to come together. And I guess my question for you guys at this point would be kind of, and maybe you're going to talk about this, like, what's next? Like, when are we going to get another opportunity to be like, oh, okay, we've kind of introduced the topic today and we discussed it, and like, kind of like, where are we going?
Thank you. Yeah, to answer that gratefully. So we got a lot of written feedback today in the service. So the next step is going to be looking through that. We are going to, I'm looking for Jane. We're going to, on a lot of Jane's expertise as we go through the feedback that we got today. And we'll, once we have that, we'll be sharing that and planning additional events and activities where people can, have input and collaborate and discuss some more. So, but not a specific date right now. And then should we maybe hear from somebody down at this end who's feeling super confident?
I'm feeling really good about some of Jane's comments about being thorough, making sure everybody's able to totally express themselves, not to rush into something, and have an avenue for everyone to be heard.
Anybody else that shifted that would like to, or didn't shift? So as you all have seen, we've been getting feedback from the congregation in November and again today, and we'll be compiling that. And then there has been talk of small group.
There's been talk of a lot of things. So one thing that we might do moving forward is plan some educational small groups around some of the themes and interests that people are discussing. So things like doing more exercises like this, learning about group process. We have a lot of ideas. So if you have any ideas that you want to share for future work related to building fellowship and community and talking about our shared values, please let us know. Elizabeth, go ahead.
You remember when we had that box and people would get films talking about who they were and themselves, and it went up on a screen? That was the best thing ever, I thought. And in this group, any of these things, when I hear people talking, I never remember names, but I feel like I'm getting to know people right in this room today. And I loved that thing, that box thing. I don't know how much effort it took to put it together. And I'm not volunteering. But I thought it was a great idea, because then you realize that the woman in the black hat lived in wherever, Uganda, I don't know. I liked it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So everybody, thank you. Oh,
Anybody who has any ideas or suggestions? Here we are. Come to any of these people with your ideas, and then we'll bring them together to Ezra's group.
awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Oh, yeah, Ann, go ahead.
I also was impressed with how thoughtful the comments were. Is this recorded by any chance so that we can go back and transcribe some of that, I think?
Awesome. Thank you. Excellent question. And thank you, Holden, for being our tech genius. Thank you to And thank you to everyone on our committee. Also, thank you to Eric for helping set up the chairs. Shelby made the slides. Jennifer had the exercise. Jane is our data scientist. Anna's going to be typing up some notes. Everybody else, we were passing out cards. We were collecting things. We were working together. So everybody here is excellent. It was wonderful to chat with you all today, and have a lovely week and stay warm.